Now, in my previous video, I talked about why I probably wouldn't buy a McLaren right now. And while there were people that disagreed with me, I think that the vast majority of people understood my reasoning. And honestly, I felt like I was very fair with what I said. With that said, I think that a lot of people took that video as me saying that Lamborghini does not have any of those issues, because obviously, instead of a McLaren 720S that I talked about buying in that video, I ended up with a Huracan Performante. So in this video, for full transparency, because I'm not really on any brand side, because none of them are giving me cars to drive around for free, I figured I'd share with you the 3 issues that I've had with this Lamborghini so far. Now, I'll start off by saying that while I have had little issues with this car, none of them have resulted in a catastrophic failure, where I guess, knock on unnecessarily expensive carbon fiber trim, this car doesn't end up on a flatbed at some point during my ownership. But we'll see what happens with that. And also, because I have had a lot of people mention the name of the channel, Car Problems, I guess the topic of this video really explains why I called it that, because there are good and bad problems associated with messing around with cars. So issue number 1 that I've had is the least concerning of the bunch, and it's actually the most recent issue that I've come across in this car, and that is whenever it seems to get wet, especially when you drive it in the rain. I've had this car in the rain probably about 10 times now, and in the previous video I drove it in this weird kind of May snowstorm thing where it was half rain, half snow. Ultimately the car got a little bit wet, parked it in the garage, and then when I went to go move it out of the garage for the first time, put it in reverse, that automatically prompts the backup camera, which, by the way, is basically a potato in what is a nearly $400,000 vehicle. It's pretty pitiful how bad the camera quality is in some of these Lamborghinis. Either way, I got this message on screen. Instead of the normal backup camera that would show up, I got a message, black screen, it just said rear view camera unavailable. I've had backup cameras in a number of cars, including my previous Lamborghini, and this was never an issue. I think normally when you have a backup camera, as soon as you put it in reverse, you expect that camera to work. There are certain instances where the camera is like hidden behind a badge, or it's something that physically moves into position once you initiate it. So if you live in somewhere where there's a lot of ice and the car is completely frozen over, maybe your backup camera won't work. But in the case of pretty normal conditions and clearly just some moisture in the wiring or something like that, the camera is very temperamental whenever the car gets driven in wet weather. And honestly, even in some instances, after it's been washed, the camera may or may not decide to work. I'm assuming that this is something that is specific to my car, and I will be bringing it to the dealer to have them address this situation. Maybe it's a normal thing, I haven't talked to anybody about it, but it is something that does pretty regularly happen when this car is exposed to wet weather. Are you going straight as well? Alright, that means I'm going this way. The second issue that I've had is extremely annoying, and it's in regards to the front lift system, which this car has. A lot of mid-engine supercars do have them because the front end sits quite low. So when you need to go over a speed bump, or when you need to enter most driveways, if I'm being honest, using a front lift is kind of a necessity, and almost all of these cars come with them. Now, just to give you guys an idea of how slow the front lift is on this Lamborghini, I'm going to engage it right now. So actually, I have to be below the speed of 70 kilometers an hour. I'm engaging it now, and it is in the process of going up. If I go over 70 kilometers an hour while trying to initiate the front lift, it'll go back down automatically and won't work. It's still in the process of going up. Once I've slowed down, it'll help to go up a little bit faster. It is now all the way up. So that is how long it takes for your front lift to be activated on a Huracan or a Huracan Performante, because it's the same front lift system. It takes a very long time, and everything is functioning properly. The reason why it's functioning properly is because I'm the only one in this car. If I have a passenger, what ends up happening is the front lift goes up, and then after about 10 seconds, I get this message on screen that says lift failure, and it immediately drops back down. I got this car basically a year ago, so spring 2019, and for the first 3 or 4 months, this was never an issue. It wasn't until towards the end of the summer, after some significant driving, that all of a sudden I started getting this lift failure issue, and it's not something like the backup camera where it happens from time to time. Every single time I have somebody in the passenger seat and try to use the front lift, it immediately fails. Now, I don't know a whole lot about how this particular lift system works, but I'm assuming that there's something wrong with the actual lift itself, and I'm not sure what it's sensing when there's 2 people in the car versus 1 person in the car that causes it to fail. I have to assume it's something that has to do with weight, where something is malfunctioning in the lift. If it senses too much weight, it immediately goes down. Again, I have to bring it to the dealer to find out what the issue is, but for the meantime, it's not something that makes the car drive any worse. It doesn't really hurt my experience with it. It's just something that I really have to be aware of when I have a passenger in the car, because if we do come across a speed bump, we're probably going to have a hard time. And I will say, somewhat in defense of Lamborghini, front lifts in pretty much any car that has one, it's a pretty common thing to fail at some point in time. Definitely not when the car is this new. It's basically just over a year old. But when you have a front lift in a car, typically over time, that is something that is going to need replacement or fixing, or perhaps even removal completely. So for me, if you can find a car that gives you the mid-engine experience but doesn't necessarily require a front lift, that's more or less an ideal situation, because in my experience, front lifts on any car, they're just a pain. Which brings us to the final and by far most serious issue that I've had with this car, and that is about 3 or 4 times now, the car has randomly gone into limp mode. Now, the very first time this happened, I was actually out on a drive with a bunch of people, and I was about an hour and a half from home, so definitely not in a spot where I wanted my car to break down, and seemingly out of nowhere, just cruising at about 80 kilometers an hour, I get this big warning on screen, and the car basically goes into limp mode, which, let me tell you, I wish I could get it on camera, because I don't exactly know how to initiate this. It just happens at random, but it sounds and runs absolutely terrible. The first time it happened, honestly, it really scared me, because it basically cuts all of your power. The car runs horribly. It sounds like the engine is about to explode. It still lets you stay in race mode and shift manually, which I thought was kind of a little bit strange, but for the most part, the car ran terribly, and my worst fear was that it was going to basically just blow up. I thought something went catastrophically wrong and I was going to have a major issue. Luckily, I was able to limp to our next stop, which was for basically half an hour. So I drove the car in limp mode for half an hour, which I probably shouldn't have done, turned it off, and basically had the expectation that I was going to need a flatbed to the dealership at this point, because there was no way it was going to restart. And then when I restarted it, everything was normal again, and the car was no longer in limp mode. It was like nothing had happened. So immediately I called the dealer and asked them what the heck was happening. Maybe they had some kind of insight on whether or not this was a significant issue. And they told me basically something along the lines that it wasn't a very common issue that they've heard much about, but if the car restarted and nothing is wrong with it and it runs totally normal, then you have nothing to worry about. So that's kind of the attitude that I've had since that first situation. Since then, it's happened 2 or 3 more times, but every time it's happened, I've pretty much just pull over as soon as it goes into limp mode, restart the car, and everything seems to be normal. I do plan on bringing it to the dealer once everything is over with this current global situation, and hopefully I can have some of these issues that I talked about in this video sorted out. And I guess I should clarify, because I kind of glanced over it, what I think the issue is with the car going into limp mode is some kind of a misfire, but until they scan the car and find out what the issue is, if anything pops up, I honestly don't know. I just stopped recording, but I remember there is a 4th issue that I've had with this car, and that is in regards to the driver's side window. Again, it's a minor issue and I have to get it sorted out at the dealer, but seemingly at random, if you roll the window all the way down, when you go to put it back up, it'll go halfway up and then back down. And then you press it again, it'll go halfway up and back down. It does that 3 times until it goes all the way up. So it's not like it won't go up, but it just decides for whatever reason that it's going to take 3 tries rather than 1. Which I will admit is kind of embarrassing when you pull up and everyone's looking at the car, and then you try to roll the window up and it just keeps going up and down. You really look like you have no idea what you're doing, even though it's not your fault in the first place. But again, these are issues that you kind of have to live with cars like this. And I guess in fairness to Lamborghini, the 2016 Huracan 610-4 that I had, I drove for 2 years. Had no issues with it whatsoever, not a single hiccup with that car. It was extremely reliable and honestly a pleasant surprise, because that being my first Lamborghini, I was really concerned about having some really big repair bills or something going horribly wrong, but that never happened. I had a rear-wheel drive Audi R8 after that, and I had no issues with that either. Now I have a Huracan Performante, all three cars sharing a lot of the same parts, and as you can see, I've had a number of, I'm gonna say, small issues for the most part, but they're definitely things that are annoying and things that I did not experience with my previous cars. So I guess the point of this video is not to scare you away from cars like this, or even to say that cars like this aren't very good quality, because I don't think that's the case at all. There's obviously a huge handmade aspect to vehicles in this particular price bracket, which is part of the reason why they're so expensive in the first place. But for the most part, one sec, I gotta drive by these guys. They were waving me on, and sometimes you just got to give the people what they want. I guess what I'm saying here is, regardless of whether or not you think there should be issues with a car this expensive, there are more than likely going to be at least minor issues with a lot of cars at this particular price point. The more complex, the more I guess intricate the design is, the more likely something is going to go wrong. So again, it's not to scare you away from a car like this if this is something that you want to buy or aspire to own one day, but it's just something to be aware of, because like the channel says, car problems, they're good problems, but they can also be bad problems. Anyways guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of a better idea of what kind of this channel is all about. Yes, I own this car, and maybe it would be to my benefit to say only nice things about it, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. My experience with it has not been 100% positive. These are the issues that I've had, and that's something that I plan on sharing with all of my vehicles, and hopefully vehicles that I don't own but get to drive in the near future. We'll see what happens with the channel and which direction that it goes in. Either way, if you guys enjoy the video and appreciate the honesty, I guess, please support this video with a like. That helps me out tremendously. And if you're not subscribed to the channel and don't want to miss out on more car videos, new ones every single week, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. Other than that, guys, if you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down below in the comments. And with that said, we'll see you in the next one. This road is way too bumpy for this car.